8:35, David C. Stokes of the Show Me Institute is here on KCMO. They're a Missouri-based think tank, and it is always good to have them right here on Wednesday mornings at 8:35. So let's start, David, with Kansas City, Missouri, as I think you would put it, bailing out the KCATA, the Transit Authority, to the tune of $46 million. What's going on there? And how absurd is it that the city, which actually was trying to push back on the KCATA budget, did ultimately cave?
Well, it's a tricky call because there's good news and bad news in this one. And I guess, right, the bad news is that it's starting out with not only the primary source of funding, $70 million or so that they passed with the budget, but this new package of about $45 million more that's going to limit the cuts from KCATA on the bus route. So there won't be any bus route cuts, although they are reducing hours on some of the routes generally. So slightly less service. And right, so the fight is, and a lot of this is internal political fighting, so tough to know exactly what's going on, but the city wants to audit the KCA funds more to make sure they're getting what they're paying for. And KCATA, which is at least a semi-independent agency, is resisting that, saying they're already audited for many purposes. I don't know necessarily who's in the right there, but I certainly think if Kansas City is going above and beyond the funding, meaning they're giving more than just the taxes that they collect for KCATA, that they should have some right to get additional audits to make sure the money's well spent. So that's the discussion here. That's the decision. KCATA is getting their money this time, at least for the next year or so, and hard choices are going to be put off. Now, the good news, it's not as good as it could have been due to some exceptions, but we are seeing fares being reinstated with KCATA, at least for mini riders, and that is very good news. Free transit is bad transit. Free transit is dirty transit that people don't want to ride. So reinstituting the fares is, at least for many people, is very good news.
Well, it was a failure. Here are the numbers. I mean, there are less people still riding KCATA than there were pre-COVID. They introduced free fares, and less people are riding than 5-6 years ago. So it is failed. But on top of that, with the KCATA budget, it's up almost 50% from where it was before COVID. I mean, that is insane. I don't know if other cities have someone who can basically doge something like the KCATA, the Transit Authority, but I would be curious to see how their budget's up 50% and what the heck it's being spent on, to now where the city has to kick in tens of millions of dollars in more monies.
Well, I would bet that, like any company, with the inflation we saw in 2022 and 2023, and still continuing, though not nearly as high, that, it's a lot of personnel money. They're paying their people a lot more, as we saw in governments and private companies around the country. And that's just it. And so that's why it was so bad to eliminate the fares, because while that might not be a big part of the KCA budget, it's a part of the budget. It helps raise money to fund the services by the people who use the services. What's more, it gives people better service in multiple ways. The obvious one, it funds it, but crime increases on transit when you move to free transit. The homeless start using transit as mobile homeless shelters when you move to free transit. And I think the most disappointing part of reinstituting fares is that, according to at least one article I read, they're going to keep free transit for homeless people and others others using social services right now. So the problems, while it's good that they're reinstituting fares for some, the problems that free fares cause, making the entire ride less pleasant for many people, so they choose not to use it, even if they otherwise wanted to, that could well continue because they're maintaining free fares for certain populations who cause many of these problems. So that's the disappointing part.
You tell me, yes or no, on this correct analysis, David Stokes of the Show Me Institute. Free transit actually hurts the quality of transit for the working poor that use it, but make the woke rich people feel good about themselves.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better myself, Pete. I mean, we've got an op-ed that's hopefully being carried in the Examiner in the next week or so that talks in more detail about that. Free transit makes for worse transit.
Yeah,
absolutely. Free transit is an actively bad thing, and people who still use transit are like, well, I don't want to pay for it. This free transit is great. Well, it's going to be even better after you have to pay a very, very modest amount for some of this transit use. Bus fares are not high. People who use bus fares can afford to use the bus, and they will get better, more efficient, cleaner, more enjoyable services because of it.
David, let me ask you about this free market guide for Missouri cities, towns, and villages that you put out. And you make the case here that Missouri cities rely too much on unstable revenue sources like sales and income taxes, and they underutilize more stable options such as property taxes and user fees. I think calling property taxes a more stable revenue source in Jackson County in particular is not going to be a popular take, but I will let you defend it, David.
Well, that's true in Jackson County. But when I do the follow-up papers next year on free market policies for counties and limited government for counties, I'll certainly be talking about Jackson County assessments. But right, I think it would surprise people, Pete, to know that cities in Missouri depend on property taxes less than cities in any other state. So we are 50th for use of property taxes to fund municipalities. Now, I want to emphasize, I'm talking cities. I'm not talking school districts and fire districts and counties and so on, but cities. And that our two largest cities, including Kansas City, obviously, rely way too much on very harmful earnings taxes, local income taxes, as your listeners know. And other cities rely too much on sales taxes. I'm not against sales taxes, and I'm not against cities using sales taxes to fund services. I just think that we want more of a three-legged stool that fits evenly between sales taxes, property taxes, and user fees. And by user fees, I mean, if you want to play golf in your local municipal golf course, you should, pay to do that. That shouldn't be funded by taxes. That should be funded by your fee to play on the golf course. And I think we need a more balanced three-legged stool to do that. And the way cities are funded with sales taxes for most cities and villages and towns is a little bit out of whack. And that's just how there's a lot of good arguments for more use of property taxes. I do talk about how, getting a little bit obscure here, but over a decade ago, Kansas City had a land tax, which is a property tax on the value of the land only. It's widely believed by economists to be one of the better taxes out there, and they got rid of it. Like, they went in the exact wrong direction, depending more and more on the earnings tax and less on getting rid of the land tax. And more so than stability, it's just the evidence that I talk about in the paper that, property taxes harm economic growth less than other taxes. And people might be surprised by that. They might not want to hear it, but it's true. More dependence on property taxes is going to be better for everybody for economic growth for your community.
Well, now you're coming after those of us who like to hack it around the Muni a couple times a year, and I can't have that on the show. So we'll have to get you back another time, David Stokes. You can read the piece at showmeinstitute.org. Well done as always, my friend. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Pete. And right, I'm not against municipal golf courses. I love them. I just think as they usually are, you should pay your amount to ride that card and enjoy your time there, not with general taxes.
I agree.
The argument there.
I'm with you, David. Thank you, man.
Thanks, Pete.
I'm not looking for any subsidies to play a crappy round of golf. No doubt about it. He's right.